Hello and welcome to episode number 219 of the ETPHD team podcast with myself and Danai. Hi Danai, how are you?
I am good, thank you. I'm here with my big headset looking fabulous. I even have a microphone today.
We love it when you wear the headset. It's an absolute vibe. If you don't have them on, it's not the same.
It's not the same, no.
How are you? Anna, how are you?
I'm good. We were saying earlier, weren't we, how for the past couple of weeks I've just been feeling like a little bit off. Can't put my finger on why, but it turns out I'm just so aligned with the universe. That's why.
Yeah, so I forgot to Google what actually was happening this week, but I think Mercury's in retrograde. Then there was also the full moon at the weekend, and then there was some sort of eclipse or planetary alignment of some sort, which I feel like we should probably know about. At the start of this weekend, I'd seen obviously a TikTok, and they were talking about how, you know, things were going to be turbulent, and it was a big big time of change for a lot of people. And so when you were saying those things, I thought, gosh, you're just so aligned with the universe.
I know it's it can't be helped. What can I say?
Honestly,
how are you?
Congratulations to you. I'm fine, thanks. I also said earlier, so as I said on the podcast a few weeks ago, that I found out I had a deviated septum, and that was causing me a lot of problems in terms of my sinuses, and I've had like chronic brain fog, headaches, sore throat, sore ears. Anyway, took some drugs, took some nose spray for a couple of weeks, steamed my face half an hour a day. Well, I'm lying because I was supposed to do half an hour a day. I did not do half an hour a day, but I tried at least 15 minutes, and then I'd be like, oh, I've had a shower, that's the same. Anyway, did that. And alas, last weekend slept for 11 hours and woke up and it was worse than ever before. So I've just been back to the doctors, who said, okay, they'll give you some more antibiotics, because, you know, what our guts and vaginas love is more antibiotics and more nose stuff. And then if it doesn't go away this time, then you're going to need surgery. And I'm like, great. Absolutely ideal. So apparently the way he described it is, so inside your nose, you've got these things called, I want to say they're called like turbinates or something, and they're basically on the inside your nostril, on the outside of your nose, right? And they basically help with like airflow and stuff. And because there's 3 on each side, and because my septum is so deviated and currently everything's so inflamed, I think because of hay fever, they're actually the outside of my nostril on the inside is touching my deviated septum, such that there's actually no air. Like there's no airflow going in from that nostril, and it's just constant. So when I woke up this morning, I felt like the whole left side of my brain, face, throat and chest were just going to pop open. And he was like, yeah, there's nothing, like, it's because nothing can get in and out because it's just completely like blocked. I'm like, that's ideal, really. So, you know, I was moaning this morning when I left the doctors, and I was voice noting Emma, and I could feel myself getting emotional, and I was like, I'm just fed up of it. And I thought, this has been a few months where I've struggled with this stuff, and I thought, you know, so many people have things that last for their entire lifetime, and it's pathetic to be moaning after a few months. And it gave me a whole new again, I have a lot of perspective for people that have chronic pain and illness anyway, because of various friends and family, but also the extra dose of like, it really suck. Like, it would really suck to just, if I had to live with half a nose for my entire life, I'd lose my shit, I tell you that. Anyway, so that's how I am.
Sending you a big hug, and I can imagine it must be impacting really your breathing then, if there's no air coming in from one nostril, which then messes up with everything, right? Headaches, brain fog, and stuff. I don't know how your experience has been with like GPs and doctors, but I'm kind of losing my mind because it's just really, really slow. If you're not dying, you're not seeing anyone for months. And I really resonate with what you're saying. Bless my clients every time I go to I don't want to jinx it. I'm not coughing right now, but my cough keeps going and coming back, and I still don't have an answer as to what's going on. And it's been now since July 2022, which is insane. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time. I certainly will not complain about my few months. I think, honestly, I've only ever really had good experiences with the NHS in general and doctors, and my doctor gave me an excellent explanation with the drawers on his desk of the different parts of the nose. He was showing me like the bottom drawer is this part and the middle drawer is this part, and then he drew me a diagram. Like he was great. I really had a good time with him, to be honest. So sorry that yours is not been so effective. Maybe you should come live on the Wirral and see my doctor. I feel like he's very efficient.
I was gonna say it might be a London issue rather than because there's so much demand here, especially after COVID.
Okay, let's get cracking on the questions. Anna, do you want to go first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who did you say?
Sorry.
I was going to jump in.
I said Anna, but I appreciate both of your enthusiasms.
Sorry, I didn't hear the Anna part.
So, do you think restriction equals discipline? People are constantly praising disciplined people, and I used to identify with that. I'm still disciplined in other aspects, but the people we see as disciplined, are they just restrictive? I kind of feel not as strong because I am in the no restriction part of my journey, which does kind of make me feel weak.
Great question.
Very good question. I think first and foremost, right, the latter part about when we feel that someone is being disciplined, therefore they might be restrictive. I think it's really hard to know what's going on with someone's relationship with food because we only see a little snapshot. We might not have the whole picture. But I do think that that's a really great point, and I've discussed it with a lot of clients because the reality is a lot of restrictive behaviors or diet mentality behaviors, if you like, have been praised by society and diet culture. So a lot of people praise these things as you have so much self-control, you have so much discipline. How do you do that without actually knowing what that individual might be experiencing, which I think just reinforces the whole narrative that certain behaviors are good, we assign moral value, we feel good if we can, adhere to these things. And recently a client of mine said that to me when she lost her appetite in response to kind of struggling with anxiety, how a part of her was a little bit like, oh, now I find it easier to actually restrict, and getting that phrase that I'm not eating as much. So yeah, it can be a very kind of tricky one to kind of navigate.
I think that's such a good point, and I just wrote a presentation on this morning actually for another coach of diet culture, because it's that it is weight bias. We associate restriction with dieting, and diet culture has told us for many years that dieting and leanness is success, and so of course restriction then falls into, okay, well, restriction means success, and so you've hit such a good point on that. I think another thing to consider too is that often, and I'm generalizing a bit, but a lot of people who are drawn to extreme restriction and control with their diet often are kind of A-type personalities who are often high achievers outside of their diet. And so sometimes it's like, oh, look at that person, she's really lean and controlled and restrictive, and she's, excelling in her career and, whatever else she's achieving. And it's like, that's because of her personality type and like her drive and her ambition, things like that. It's got nothing to do with her body and her restriction, but we associate these things together because of diet culture, and probably because of the propensity of people who potentially have more A-type personality traits to fall into restriction and diet culture. It's like a kind of self-perpetuating cycle a little bit, I think. Okay, Danai, question. Oh, sorry, Anna. Do you want to say something?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So if you think someone has an eating disorder, how do you handle this? It's hard to sit back and I'm concerned about her health.
Oh, this is tough. It was tough. We sort of spoke a little bit about this on the last episode that we did with Roslyn, and she had some great things to say on that. So if you haven't listened to that a couple of episodes ago, then do listen to that one. I think all you can really do is provide a safe space for conversation. I think if somebody is not ready to change, then you pressure them to change is not going to help. It might be that if you are a person that is trusted and you have a good relationship with that person, it might be that you maybe pose a couple of questions, like not accusatory, not saying, I think you have an eating disorder, etc., but more like, do you feel like you're struggling with food at the moment, or do you feel like you're struggling with like your body at the moment, or do you feel like what's going on for you at the moment? Because often with eating disorder, it's not really about those things, but what's going on for you at the moment, I just want to reassure you, like, I am here if you want to talk about anything. And the Beat website has some really good information for people who are supporting people with eating disorders. So it's worthwhile going onto the Beat website, who and they do this day in, day out. They actually have certain groups to support people whose loved ones are living with eating disorders. So they're, you know, experts in this field. So I would refer you to the Beat website, which is BEAT. I think it's beat.org.uk. Feel like I should spell it out because I'm not sure how like when my words are coming out at the moment.
How congested you sound.
Yeah, I'm like, especially with my accent, like, what does that mean? So yeah, I'd probably direct you more towards that area.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, because I had seen the question and I Googled some resources, and I also saw there was another website quite good, the nationaleatingdisorders.org. It's called NEDA for short, NEDA, and they also have some kind of practical tips on how to raise concern about someone struggling potentially with an eating disorder. That was quite helpful.
Fabulous. Okay. Any tips on setting up a nighttime routine and getting off my phone?
I actually did, I've just read a client update before we did this, who we've been working on her evening routine, because that's when she's found that she's scrolling and more urges to overeat or just mindlessly snack when she's on her phone. And this week she checked in and said she's bought herself an alarm clock. So it means that she can just put her phone in another room and she doesn't have to be on it. Like, she doesn't have to worry about it until the next day. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. Aside from kind of setting yourself an evening routine, I think it's just ways that are going to help you wind down. And although like the mindless scrolling might feel like it's a way to switch off, obviously it's still the lights, maybe noises, that's still quite stimulating. So for me, it's all about like down regulating, and don't really watch a lot of TV, but maybe put some music on, soft lights, do my yoga. I've stopped journaling in the evening because I was finding that was keeping me up sometimes. So switch that around, and potentially some meditation as well. That would be on my list.
On that note,
Yeah.
if anyone uses Insight Timer, sorry, Danai, go in a second. If anyone uses Insight Timer, let me just recommend to you this fantastic man. He's called, Andrew Johnson, and he's Scottish. And no, we're not related, but he's just fantastic. Every meditation session I listen to, and I use his nighttime ones, which is why I'm talking about now. Every meditation I've done with him, and nighttime one, instantly I'm just off to sleep instantly. And that might also be because my brain is the size of a watermelon right now. Or it could just be because of his soothing Scottish tones, but highly recommend that. Sorry, Danai, off you go.
No, I was just gonna say, actually, very similarly, I find the yoga nidra sessions, which is nothing to do with yoga, it's just a type of body scan. Apparently, it's supposed to help you enter kind of a deeper relaxation state, and I found those at night are really helpful. But you know, from my personal experiences and with clients as well, I think the main key is just to explore different things, and until you find out what really works for you. It might be a little bit of a trial and error to see. For example, you know, some people find journaling really helpful, other people might not. And you know, for me, it's always like, since I was more open to reading more fiction books, because I think for years I had a mentality that when I sit down to read something, I need to learn something. So I was reading a lot of you know, psychology, nutrition, self-help type of books. But now I was like, okay, let me just explore something different. And finding a good fiction book, I think, can be really great, because again, a little bit of a double-edged sword, because it can also be like when you watch a movie and you want to see what's happening, so it could keep you up a little bit longer. But I think if it's something quite relaxing and having kind of a boundary in place, and then maybe following it up with a meditation afterwards, it helps you kind of drift off, can be quite helpful.
Yeah, I think the idea of nighttime routines and morning routines is kind of like an overcomplication of like what just relaxes you and what wakes you up. It's like, what happened to just, I'm going to get ready for bed? Like, why does it have to be a thing now? And it does seem to be a thing, right? I honestly think like make a list of a couple of things that soothe you and do that. It like might be any of these things, but it also might just be part of your nighttime routine. Might be watching your favorite episode of your a program that you love with your partner, and then doing some skincare. And then, like, again, I do think turning your phone off and some sensory deprivation before bed is quite helpful for sure, but it's not for everyone. If you have like the thing with screens is obviously the blue light, and you can turn the blue light off your phone, but you can't turn off your TV, I don't think. Well, maybe some TVs you can, but you can get blue light blocking glasses or whatever you want to do that could potentially help. But the idea is just like, don't overcomplicate it. Part of my nighttime routine is just doing my skincare, and I do it in a certain order, and I have a certain amount of time between serum and moisturizer where I go and make myself a cup of tea, and I do these things. And it's like, look, if you've got kids and things, it's going to look very different to if you don't. My doctor's Jay said, do you snore at night? And I was like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know, mate. I don't have anyone next to me. And I was like, I do have an app. And he was like, you've got an app for snoring. And I was like, well, I don't have anyone in my bed, so how else am I supposed to know? And he was like, fair enough. I'm like, okay. So obviously, like, other people around will impact things, and maybe sex is on your nighttime routine. Lucky you. Actually, nah. Nighttime sex sucks. I'm like, I'd rather go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning. But whatever it is, don't overcomplicate it and just think like what suits you. It can be 5 minutes or it can be an hour. Anna.
I've vacuum packed away all of my clothes that don't fit anymore. I used to love clothes and shopping. Since the first lockdown, I've been living in gym leggings and oversized hoodies and never got out of that again. I'm not saying that I don't still want to spend. I'm not saying I don't still want to spend a lot of my time in that because comfort, but I feel like I've got to the point where there have been a couple of times where I've gone shopping for something over the last couple of years and I've ended up in the changing room in tears. I've set myself the target of going shopping at the end of the month when I get paid. Any tips on how to make a shopping trip bearable or maybe even fun again?
Very good question. What I would say, just first of all, to share my experience with friends and family and my own. A lot of people actually after COVID, at least from what I've heard, people I know and myself as well, struggle with the idea of shopping. I think we were so comfortable being in our comfort zones at home, not really doing anything, wearing leggings all the time, that then after, when everything kind of opened up again all of a sudden after a couple of years, I also found the idea of shopping really, really terrifying. A lot of people have said that. But of course, it's even harder when we also struggle with our body image and our relationship with our body, and perhaps have experienced some changes with weight. And then we find a lot of kind of safety and comfort in wearing certain clothes, and it can feel quite challenging to find clothes where we feel nice and comfortable in. But first of all, it's amazing that you are kind of setting the intention to go shopping to buy clothes you feel comfortable with, because it's hard to sometimes even make the decision to actually accept our current body and decide to do that. I think practical tips how to make it more fun or less easy. I think for me, what has helped previously is actually browsing online first and finding a style that I kind of like, and then going to the shops, as opposed to going without having any idea of what I would like. If that helps.
I actually, interestingly, do the opposite. Because when I know what I like and then I go to the shop and I can't find it or it doesn't fit or whatever, I get annoyed. Whereas if I don't have any expectations, I don't get so annoyed by it, because I just think, oh, I would have thought this. So I think for me personally, again, everyone's different, right? I think if you're like Danai, then that will work really well. And if you're like me, then maybe not. But I think managing your expectations of it and not going in thinking I need to be wearing X, Y, and Z because that's what I used to wear, or that's what I used to like. It took me a long time to realize that like my style of like, I used to always wear bodycon all the time, and then I would start like my body started changing, and then I thought I don't really feel comfortable in this anymore. It must be my body. And I was like, it's because it's not my style. Well, sometimes it's my style because, you know, I am a thirst whore, but other times like it's like I do actually just want to wear like baggy trousers and whatever, and that's fine. So I think trying to remove any expectations of it. I think also just try and like make it a bit more of an experience. May I recommend a Starbucks iced shaken oat espresso, whatever it's called. That will make it more enjoyable, because it's, you can have a decaf and it's a fantastic drink. But like make it more of a thing, of like an event, rather than, I'm not going in to get loads of clothes, I'm going in to just try and enjoy a couple of hours of shopping, and if I manage to find something great, and then when you're actually in the stores, like be open to trying different stuff, pick up things that you wouldn't normally try, just to see what it's like, pick up different sizes, and don't get tied to the sizes that you're picking up. We've said this before, like I'll often bring in, especially in like Zara, my god, I'll bring in anything from an extra small to an extra large, and who knows what will fit. Probably a bit of both in different items of clothing, but trying to detach from that and just not looking at the actual sizes anything, and more just about like, okay, well, in this clothes shop I am an extra large, and in this clothes shop I am an extra small, and that's because that's the way that women's clothing works. The little assholes. Well, it's quite good now that I think that it works like that. As much as it's annoying for ordering stuff online, it's actually great, because you really know that like clothes sizes mean absolutely bugger all.
Yeah, it's so hard to rely on sizes anymore. I really agree with that. I never look at sizes anymore unless it's a staple item that you kind of know how it's going to fit you. The other thing I would say, definitely don't go when you're due your period. From personal experience, that's horrible, because everything irritates you, especially if you're the type of person that you tend to feel more irritable before your cycle.
I was going to add, it might not, I found it really helpful to go with friends or a friend, because they're likely going to pick out things that you might not have ordinarily have gone for. Like you were saying, Emilia, like not always going for kind of what used to suit you or what styles you used to go for, and just becoming more open with that. And then it makes it just a lot more fun anyway, because you've got someone to talk to and have a chat with and just have a good time.
And don't do that thing where you put a podcast on or music on when you're in the shops, because you think that that's a good idea, but all that does is it overwhelms you even more. If you think of like that, like it becomes a bit sensory overload. You've got all of this stuff in front of you, you're trying to make a decision, you're trying to feel connected to your body, you've got Catherine Ryan in your ear, and then there's music playing in the shop, and it's too much and it can become overwhelming. So like it can be tempting if you are on your own just to like put music in and have a good time, but I think for a lot of people actually it almost creates more of a stressful experience. Okay, Danai, question.
So body image is something I find really difficult to talk about, even with my closest friends, family. I feel ashamed and embarrassed that something so silly is having or has been having such a huge impact on my life. Is this common? Why do you think this is?
That's the question.
I feel like we answered that last week.
I think we did. I'm not sure how that's happened, but we did answer that question last week, Danai. So do you want to do the next one?
Okay. Yes, I'll just do the next one, not a problem. So I know dating is not your area of expertise, but
No,
I
we've had that
think
one as well.
Sorry, Danai, I'll have a little look. Okay. I think the next question is, Danai, it's your question of how to work through sadness and grief without numbing out.
Yeah.
We've not done that, have we, Anna?
No.
Okay. This is tough because it's to some degree, if you're really struggling with grief, then it is probably going to be something more that therapy would support you with. And especially in the UK, you can actually self-refer for grief counselling if it's something that you are really struggling with. And so that is my number one thing to focus on, first of all. I think the kind of clues in the question in that it is about working through it, or maybe not even working through it. I think with these things, we often try and rush through it because we don't feel like we should be feeling these things. And actually, grief is just love without a home. And there's nothing, although it's hard to sit with for sure, I think that it often takes longer to move through than you want it to. And some of the difficulty with it is you thinking, when is this ever going to end? And so part of me sort of thinks, well, can I fathom a life where I'm doing all of these things and I recognize that it's still there, but I can also live my life at the same time and create the space. Maybe that's through journaling or grief tunneling, like we've spoken about before, or talking with friends where you say, I'm still creating the space for these things. Because again, if we're trying to rush it out, we then think, well, I don't want to talk to my friends about it because, you know, it's been, what if, say you're grieving a relationship, say, right, it's like, well, it's been 6 months since we broke up, so I shouldn't feel that grief anymore. And to some degree, there is an element of like, okay, let's be objective with it. But other times there isn't. So I think it's less about trying to rush through it and more about trying to hold space for it whilst holding space for other parts of your life as well.
I think depending on where you're at in the process, like journaling, meditation, even potentially grief tunneling might feel too much. And I think knowing that that's okay to not want to do those things. And from my personal experience, that was when I had it was the ugliest yoga sessions, but they were the greatest for being with those feelings. Like I'd start them feeling, well, as okay as you can be, and by the end I'd skip savasana because I was already crying, but that was what I needed at the time, and that was my way of dealing with it without kind of sitting with it.
Okay, fabulous. When triggered and your instant default is to control, and that control is linked to nutritional intake, suspect there could be some validation playing into this here. Do you have any strategies to help break the cycle?
So the first part around the control?
Yeah, so when triggered and your instant default is to control, and that control is linked to nutritional intake, any strategies to help break the cycle?
I think so. You're already aware of the cycle that something is triggering you and you're controlling food to feel better. That's really great self-awareness, first of all. Now, I think what would be quite helpful is perhaps to check in what are those initial feelings, what's going on for you that you're being triggered, what do you actually really feel that then causes that need to want to control food. I imagine or assume that a way to kind of feel in control over the situation, perhaps, or I've had clients sometimes that they've said before they do it as a way to distract themselves, and kind of that food preoccupation essentially becomes a distraction from the other thing that could be going on in the first place, because essentially that is a sign that perhaps there needs some work to be done on handling your emotions in more effective ways, as opposed to kind of projecting it onto food, whether it's as a means to feel in control or as a way to find distractions. But I think identifying what those triggers are in the first place will then determine perhaps kind of other alternative ways to manage and cope with the situation, which of course it's a process in itself.
Yeah, I think for me,
I guess
go for it, Anna.
No, I was just going to say, obviously, like we seek control when things are feeling uncertain because we don't like sitting with that. And I guess part of the process in breaking that cycle is beginning to find peace in knowing that things are always going to change and things are always going to be inconsistent, and ultimately the only control we have is how we respond to those situations. And going back to kind of what Danai was saying, that's where kind of your emotional regulation will really come in, and focusing on those tools to support you in that moment.
I totally agree. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing why you have that need for control in the first place. And I think a lot of our struggles with the relationship with food can benefit from us learning to sit with uncertainty, and that can feel really unsafe and really unfamiliar. And so it's one of the reasons why we incorporate a lot of self-soothing work, whether that be through somatics or movement or anything that helps you feel more soothed, so that in those moments when you do feel triggered, you can incorporate some of these things to kind of manage that feeling of the need for control, rather than try and find another outlet for control that's not food. And so things like, again, breath work, or getting out in nature, or sensory deprivation, or thinking about all the different types of rest, social rest, like, is it something that you need to do there, or anything that allows you to feel more peaceful in that moment, changing your clothes, taking off your bra, washing your face in cold water, any of these things that just kind of help regulate you can be super effective. So I would look at, whilst you're learning to sit with that uncertainty, looking at how you can manage the feelings of potential anxiety or stress that come with sitting with that uncertainty. Danai, isn't it?
Yes. So how effective is St. John's Wort?
St. John's Wort.
That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to be really careful here, because there's some evidence to say that it could potentially be supportive of mild to moderate depression, but it's not consistent. Like, the evidence is not consistent for it. And the reason I say it's really important is that it can interact with other medications that you're taking, especially if you're taking antidepressants, and be like other prescription medications, and be really quite dangerous. So I would never recommend taking St. John's Wort in general. If it's something that you were considering it, I think there's no harm in speaking to your doctor about it, first and foremost. But yeah, there is some evidence that it could potentially support. I'm assuming that you mean in terms of mood and depression, sorry, as opposed to anything else. But again, it's not a supplement that I've ever recommended, and it's something I would definitely run past your GP.
And just something to be mindful of as well, if you did decide to take it, don't if you're on contraception.
Is that like any type of contraceptive? Do you know?
Oral contraceptive, it increases the metabolism of it, so reduces the effectiveness of the pill.
Great knowledge there. Good. Okay.
I remember looking into it when I was having anxious times. I was like, not for me.
I'd rather be anxious.
yeah, it's fine. I can sit with this.
Okay. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on calorie banking for the weekend, I suppose. Okay, so this is somebody who's working on fat loss, but also loves socializing. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
If anybody was watching, you'll have seen me like pull a face, and then when you said for the weekend, I went, okay. And I think it's always being mindful of the intention behind it. Like, if you're, like you said, if it's because you enjoy socializing and want to be able to kind of embrace the experience at the weekend while still, of course, being mindful, then absolutely I would see no issue in going, do you know what, in the working week I don't really I can afford to keep my intake a little bit lower and allow more freedom, more flexibility at the weekend. But if it's coming from I know I'm just going to overeat, then that would be a bit of a pink flag for me to go, probably not the best idea.
Yeah, I agree. It's like something that I teach on EIQ nutrition is the difference between proactive calorie cycling and reactive calorie cycling. And proactively saying I'm going to have fewer calories in the week so I can enjoy mindfully eating more calories socially at the weekend, great. If you don't feel guilt and shame around it, and you feel like you can be relatively consistent with that, great. But if it's over restrictive and not allowing yourself to have certain foods during the week and only letting yourself have them on like a Saturday or Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday, and then overeating at the weekend and then reactively restricting during the week because you know that you overeat at weekends, that's really not helpful for your relationship with food, and it's not conducive to long-term success in terms of your fat loss. So like you said, Anna, it is very much like intention and your thoughts around it as opposed to the process. But I do think some people go too far with it, and they're like, oh, I'll have 1,100 calories every day during the week, and then I'll have 3,000 calories at the weekend. And it's like, realistically, if I'm talking maybe 15% variation, like a couple of hundred calories max in terms of reducing during the week, max. Because what will happen is your training will start to suffer. More importantly, your cognition, your mood, your energy levels, all of those things during the week potentially can start to suffer, just so that you can have more food at the weekend, and that's not a situation that you want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I wanted to add that I was thinking now is kind of really also considering, might not be relevant for this client, but for other people, really considering your background. How was your relationship with food, previous struggles you had with food? I personally have found when I've worked with clients that for years they were restricting and binging, and that's very most commonly shows up as restricting during the week, binging over the weekend. That's something that most of the times what is going to be very, very triggering, to be very aware and mindful of your intentions while you're choosing to do that without that triggering any old behaviors that you've been stuck in for years.
Journaling and working on my coaching tasks are the first thing to go in my life when I'm busy, which I always seem to be. How can I work on myself when I do carve the time in my calendar but ignore it when it pops up?
Look at why you're ignoring it. I think what you're saying is you don't value it, or you don't understand why it's important, or there's a reason that you're avoiding it. And I'd say it's potentially more likely to be the latter, because we make there's going to be exceptions with this, right? Parents, especially single parents, or people who work night shifts, etc., or do surgeries, and there's always exceptions. But we make time for what we know is important to us, or we make time for things that we know are helping us or that we want to do. So you probably don't want to do it objectively, you do because you know it's helpful, right? But I avoid journaling. I avoid journaling all the time, and I say I don't have time for it. I absolutely do. I could sit for, okay, I don't really scroll social media, but I could probably sit and watch a whole episode of something, Ted Lasso on TV, and I'm like, oh, but this is more restful than journaling. It's not. Well, it might be sometimes, but all the time it's not. But I know that if I journal, it's going to feel like some stuff's going to come up, or I'm going to realize that I'm being an asshole somewhere in my life that I'm choosing to ignore, or it's going to be a feeling that I think, I don't really want to feel that right now. And I spoke about on my email to my subscribers on Monday, I'd said, I hadn't journaled in quite a long time, and on Saturday I just had a bit of time. Sorry, on Sunday I had a bit of time before I met my friend, and I thought, no, I know there's something going on, like nothing bad, but I feel a bit of sense of like a bit of unease, and I thought, I'm just going to journal on it and see what comes up. And I journaled like 4 pages, and I was crying my eyes out, but not ugly crying. Well, I mean, I probably did look ugly crying, but more like it was like a waterfall of tears from my eyes. I wasn't crying. It was like a physical release of everything in my tears that was coming out on my paper. And I felt so much lighter after it. And I thought, you should have just bloody done this weeks ago, but you've been avoiding it. And it wasn't anything bad. There's nothing wrong. And so I think with this type of work, whether it's journaling or whether it's the coaching work, maybe it's like the hunger and fullness stuff. And actually you're resistant to it because you think honouring your hunger and fullness is going to lead to weight gain. And actually you've got a fear of weight gain, but you objectively know that that's maybe not rational, but subconsciously that's still there. But you don't really know that until you lean into it and journal on it and figure it out and have these conversations like with Anna, and which I'm sure you're doing. So usually when we're avoiding stuff, it's usually for a reason, as opposed to just, well, I don't want to do it. Danai.
Mostly for Anna, would you count reformer Pilates as resistance training? Mostly regarding long-term health benefits, etc. Is there any evidence to suggest consuming turmeric has any impact on the immune system? Okay, so there are two different questions there.
Have you tried reformer Pilates?
No.
I really want to.
It's fantastic. I got into it because my mum does it. And I was like, oh, if mum can do it, it'll be great. It's really tough. Really tough. I would, there's certainly an element of resistance training, but I think in terms of kind of, obviously you want progressive overload, and there's going to be limitations with that. But I think it's one of those things, like if you enjoy it, and it's certainly going to be beneficial for health regardless, it's something that I would throw into your kind of workout schedule regardless. Yeah.
I always think it looks really fun, like hard, but really fun. I keep saying, I feel like I bet it's really good for your pelvic floor. Like that's what I feel like it looks like. If I had my legs on some sort of machine and I'm having to move my body up and down with my legs, I think, I bet I'd be getting core orgasms out my mind, but I bet it'd be really good.
There's a studio in town. Maybe you should book in when you're up.
That's a really good shout. You see me at the event, just being like completely unable to walk, but high on life at the same time.
It's interesting because also my mom also does it. I've never done it, but when she sends me some videos every now and again, and I think it can also potentially really help with the body functionality side of things. I mean, like movement all the time, but you know, it is really tough. And sometimes she sends me certain movements that she does, and I'm like, how do you do that? And of course, you had to work her way up doing it, and it requires a lot of core strength. I think that's what kind of I've seen, and I'm like, oh, your body can do incredible things. So it's a little bit like, you know, learning to do handstands or with yoga, right? Yoga is so tough as well, and it takes years of experience.
Yeah, I think with yoga though, like I've definitely found a place with yoga where I think when I started, I was like, oh, you need to do the actual poses, the asanas, like perfectly, and that's what yoga looks like. Whereas now I've definitely come to a place where I'm like, however yoga looks in my body, I'm doing it right. And so yeah, it's hard in the sense of like development and stuff, but I really have come to a place now of thinking, I know that my back doesn't really bend in that way because probably I've spent far too many years sticking my arse out, or I've just genetically I'm not very flexible, and I know that, and I'm like, but I'm still doing it right because that's what yoga looks like for me. And I'm like, oh, I know that they tell you that when you start, but you don't fully embrace that, I don't think, till you've been doing it for a while, and you're like, oh yeah, you're supposed to look however you look, and that's right. So incoming ugly yoga content coming soon.
We're always here for it.
And what was the second part of that question, Danai?
So is there any evidence to suggest consuming turmeric has any impact on the immune system?
I think with turmeric, the most of the evidence is around inflammation, which it does tie in, of course, with the immune system, but not in the immune system sense, probably this person's asking, although I'm not sure. There's some research, but the doses is relatively high. It's not like sprinkling your homemade dinner with some turmeric. The doses are pretty high, and a lot of the research is like some of it's with turmeric, some of it's with curcumin, and I think the doses maybe are slightly different, but I'm not 100% sure. And then you have to take it, like the bioavailability of it's quite low, so you have to take it with other things. I think it's like black pepper, but specific types. And then I don't think it's like conclusive, not that any science is ever conclusive, but again, it's not a supplement that I would ever recommend. I don't think there's enough evidence to support it at the dosages that you have to buy at, and you have to buy quite high doses for it to be worthwhile. But there are certain supplements where I think you have to weigh up like the cost benefit of things, right? And the pros and cons. And it's like, is there harm for it if maybe you're taking other prescription medications? Potentially. So it's always one to run by your doctor. The cost, and then the potential benefit is maybe for inflammation. But then is inflammation something that you struggle with? And then when it comes to things like your immune function, is it that you need a turmeric supplement, or is it actually that you need to manage your stress levels and your sleep and your daylight and your movement and your nutrition and those things? And we often look to supplements first, right? And obviously you're doing this work. I'm not sure whose client asked this question, but you're obviously doing the work. So you've got so much of it covered. So I would question how much additional benefit something like turmeric might have. And I think often when it's studied, it's either in animals or it's in people with things like arthritis and things where they have like an inflammatory disease. And so it's the results of that are not going to be the same as somebody who is quote unquote healthy and doesn't have these things. Okay. Me. George's question. How can values help you live an authentic life in line with your goals? Flip it on its head. First of all, your goals, you want your goals to be in line with your values. So values come first, then goals, then actions, rather than goals, values, actions. And that's the first thing.
Yeah. And I'm sure Georgia, did you say it was Georgia's client? I'm just like, but I'm sure there's an excellent resource in the library on aligning goals and values, which I'm sure Georgia will work through with you. But like you said, Emilia, it's flipping it around, and because your values are like your moral compass, and that will help you lead a more fulfilled and authentic life. And then it's breaking down into, okay, well, what are my goals and how do they actually align with what's important for me? So for example, if you're doing this work, maybe one of your core values is health, and within that value, your goal might be to reduce overeating, and then breaking it down into the actions you need to take, which when you're working within the team, you'll be working on those things anyway.
I think for me, thinking about values in terms of like in the moment struggles can be really helpful. Like take comparison, for example. Say you're scrolling social media and you find yourself comparing to someone who has had a baby and has got married, and you're actually working on your career right now, and you look at them and you think, oh, like I should have that right now. We're the same age, we went to the same school, like clearly I'm unlovable, clearly like I'm not destined to have babies, this is awful, I'm useless. But then you come back to your values and you just quit checking and go, okay, well, what are my values? My values are impact, my values are career progression, my values are financial, legacy, all of these things. And you think, okay, well, how would me having a baby and a partner and getting married right now have impacted all of those things that I say are my values? And they might not have done. Like certainly you can do all of these things and have a family, for sure, that's not what I'm saying, but you know, that other person's values might be, you know, like having children in some way. I'm trying to think of a value that would might be, but I can't think. But like might also be, I was gonna say rest, that's probably not in life with having a child, but like connection and romance and play and creativity, and these things might be like, oh well, that aligns more so with that life that they're living. And so it's just a reminder of like, oh yeah, okay, no, I'm actually in line with what I say is important to me. But it can also give you a bit of a light of like, okay, well, I'm saying these things are important, but actually I'm jealous of these things. So maybe am I saying these values are the most important things, but actually am I being a bit dishonest with myself? So I think I really like values work when it comes to feeling triggered or comparison, or when you're struggling with decisions that you've made, or maybe like if I was super exhausted all the time, I'd be like, okay, well, I really value my work and I value impact, and actually that requires me to be working this hard at the moment, and so that's okay. And or if I'm feeling like I want to rip my own brain out of my head, I can remind myself of like, well, I'm still doing this work because this is what's important. So I think they're useful in those challenging moments to bring you back to like that kind of authentic choices and decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I was thinking on that, I had a discussion clearly with recently, sorry, with a client about it, is we had a realization that there was some parts of her life became really a big part of her identity, and how essentially when our self-worth relies on external things that we should have in our life to feel worthy, obviously we're always going to feel very fragile, because if we lose these things, then we feel like we're losing our worth as well. Whereas actually to build a stronger sense of self-worth, it can be really helpful to start to think about what your values are in generally, right? So let's say you lose something happens and you lose your job, your job is not part of your identity. It's the value that you have as a human being and what you want to stand for in life, that you can still practice it through other means, right? Finding a different job or through other parts of our life. And I think that can be really, really like a really great way of building back our self-worth, especially for clients that may be struggling with that. The more we can act in alignment with our values, the more authentic we can show up, and it just has that kind of positive reinforcement.
Okay, well, let's do one last question and I'll go for it.
This has come up. This has been on my questions from last week, but I've had so many conversations this week with clients, so I'm going to ask it, and I know you're going to roll your eyes at it, both of you, because we get asked these sorts of things all the time. But what are your go-to snacks?
Do you know what I just had before the podcast? Guess what it was? Baby Bell
I'm hoping
Lights.
you're going to say a rice cake.
I had 2 Baby Bell Lights and was it a Gala apple or a Braeburn apple, all chopped into little pieces, and just ate that on the sofa in the sunshine, having my window, and I was like, this is a great wee snack. 8-9
That's
grams.
like a school snack. Cheese and apple.
Kind of like a Dairy Lee Dunker, but not obviously. That was delicious. And I mean, look, it doesn't hit my protein threshold, but that's absolutely fine for some snacks. Obviously, I know someone asked this the other day. I mean, I eat a lot of Baby Bell Lights. I love them for a snack. I love protein bars, especially right now. I love the Grenade Oreo bar, but I like to buy it when it's on offer, but often I don't. I dread to think how much money I've spent on Grenade Oreo protein bars in the last month. It would be mortifying. But I like to buy them usually when they're on offer, or like an Aldi protein bar. Love an Aldi protein bar. I love fruit. I'm really into like, again, those Aldi protein pots with like a bit of banana on top and some cinnamon. I think that's it. What are you guys?
Mine, I think, when I'm working from home, especially now that the weather is getting warmer, is smoothies. I just love a good smoothie that's kind of cold, adding some ice. So, and making it quite substantial. Oats, protein powder. I've got like a really nice chocolate protein powder, berries, bananas, any fruit that you have at home, peanut butter, etc. And I think that's my go-to when I'm at home. But recently I went through an obsession, I think, with the hot cross buns. So I was having those with kind of some peanut butter or jam and stuff, some fruit, yogurt. I mean, I'm Greek as well, so Greek yogurt is definitely one of my go-to snacks with various different topics.
I love a hot cross bun. I've been having them before I train in the mornings. Great shout. What's yours, Hannah?
Yeah.
Rice cakes.
I am slightly obsessed at the moment with caramel Snack Jacks with peanut butter on top, because it's the sweet and the salty, and that is just the best thing. And I'm really into crunchy at the moment as well. So yeah, that sounds good. Honestly, it's so good. I might just take that one now because my mouth is watering.
But it's hard to spread a rice cake with peanut butter. That's my issue. I feel like
Snack Jacks seem to have like one side that's more spreadable.
Okay.
And also, obviously, like, I don't have it, but if you were getting stressed out by it, the drizzle peanut butter is.
Oh, that's a good shout. I kind of want them now. I went through a stage after competing once of just I loved corn cakes. I do think corn cakes are delicious. And I'd have corn cakes with peanut butter and jam, and they were, heavenly. Okay, on that note, sorry. Thanks everyone for your questions. Keep them coming. Thank you both so much. Bye.
Bye.